When it comes to RPG studios, Obsidian Entertainment is among the very best. From Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Pentiment, Obsidian games have placed their stamp on the genre. Joining us today for a closer look at Avowed is game director Carrie Patel. Carrie, I'm so excited to have you here. We just saw this big reveal of Avowed, and there's so many little bits of information in there that I want to dig out and pick your brain around. But before we get into all that, I'm assuming that you don't need to have played Pillars 1 or 2 to really get into Avowed.
You're absolutely right. You don't need to have played Pillars 1 or 2. You can come to the world of Avowed fresh. We want this to be a welcoming experience to new players. But if you are a returning fan, there are some recognizable tidbits.
For people who have played Pillars 1 or 2, can you tease any more of just those general connections to the universe? And no major spoilers, of course.
Yeah. There are a couple returning characters that players might recognize from Deadfire in particular. Players who have played the original games will recognize some of the parts of the world and some of the factions. The Adirian Empire plays pretty heavily into the world of Avowed, so all of that will be familiar to returning players.
We do start to see some of that Pillars universe now in the Avowed setting, which is really exciting, and it's looking amazing so far. But can you confirm one thing for me? Are we still in Aora?
We're still in Aora, and specifically we're in a region called the Living Lands. So again, returning Pillars fans will recognize the Living Lands as this otherworldly frontier. It's very remote. It's relatively unknown. It's this very dramatic landscape full of all of these different valleys with these unique biomes and creatures, just a really unique visual perspective. And it's a wonderful frontiersy spot that's set for adventure. There's a lot that's undiscovered, and so that's the part of Aora that we're introducing players to in Avowed.
And we also see a character talking to us in the trailer. He seems like he might be a companion, because that would be a very Obsidian thing to do. So what's going on with that?
Yes, this is Kai, and he is one of the first companions you meet in the game. He's an Amawa. That's one of the unique species of the world of Aora. And Kai as a character brings a balance of this really battle-hardened perspective. He's seen a lot. He's served as a soldier and a mercenary, but he also has a really unique sense of humor. So he brings a spirit of levity and camaraderie to the party as well.
And as he's talking to us, he's also kind of conveying, well, he's straight up saying that he's afraid of you and your abilities. But it's not like the heroes are the only powerful beings in this universe. So I'm curious what that means for who we are as the player character. Are we a watcher again, like in Pillars 1 and 2? Or maybe we have some connections to the spirit realm and beyond that gives us these terrifying abilities?
So you're not a watcher this time, but you do have a unique soul connection to the world that gives you a connection to the Living Lands and to some of the more mysterious forces at work there. The player is also being sent as an envoy of the Adirian Empire, and so they come with both a very mysterious aura, but also a certain sense of political urgency.
Kai also mentions a plague. That's another bit of detail that we get within the trailer. We see a very concerning growth on a lot of the creatures in the world. What can you tell us about this plague?
I can't say too much just yet, except that it is a unique soul plague that is devouring the Living Lands, and part of the player's mission in being sent here is to investigate and try to stop it.
We also saw a lot of combat in the trailer, and we see dual-wielding pistols, we see spells, we see swords, we see just a ton of abilities. A lot that actually is really reminiscent of the Pillars universe too, but those were isometric top-down view games, and Avowed is a first-person game. So how did the team approach that same kind of fantasy combat, but in the first person for Avowed?
So we wanted to take that same depth and breadth of play styles and combat abilities and player fantasies, where you can play someone who's very magically attuned, more traditional fighter or ranger, and really invest in whatever play style is most appealing to you personally. We wanted to take that depth and breadth and translate it into a first-person experience, where you can feel the visceral nature of the attacks, feel the dynamism and the momentum of those attacks as you're executing them, and that means including a range of options like, as you noted, dual-wielding pistols, which is one of my favorites because you don't see that often in fantasy RPGs, but also traditional sword and board, a whole host of magical abilities, a lot of things that'll be both a little bit familiar but hopefully new to players as well.
And I've got one more question for you, because I know the audience is going to want to know this one, but just how big is this game?
So it's going to be roughly comparable to something like Knights of the Old Republic 2 or The Outer Worlds. It is set up as a series of interconnected open zones that players can explore at their own pace. You can invest in discovering every nook and cranny in the world, discovering every secret, finding every side quest, meeting every character, or you can have a much more focused experience. And it's really up to players and how much time they want to spend in the Living Lands, but I'm hopeful that they're going to spend a lot of time with us once Avowed releases.
Well, count me in as one of those players, because I definitely want to read and hear every line of dialogue, everything everyone has to tell me, and discover every inch of the living lands. Well, thank you again so much for being here, Carrie. This has been so insightful and fun.
Thank you, Tina. This has been a pleasure.
That was just a taste of what you can expect from Obsidian Entertainment when Avowed lands next year on Xbox, PC, and Game Pass.